Hey guys, today we're diving into something strange but oddly comforting. Why your brain tends to airbrush your past, even the messy, painful parts. Maybe it's the song that used to play during a bad breakup, and suddenly you're smiling at the memory. Or you think back to a job you hated, and now it seems kind of charming. It's weird, right? But also kind of beautiful. So before we go deeper into today's topic, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You stand in your old childhood room, now converted into a storage cave of forgotten toys and tangled extension cords. The wallpaper's faded, and there's a musty smell clinging to the air. But something inside you softens. The past suddenly feels warm, even though you remember crying yourself to sleep in that bed more times than you care to admit. That's nostalgia at work. And it's not just a passive emotion, it's a mental filter, an editor that tweaks your past into a highlight reel you're more willing to rewatch. The real kicker? Your brain isn't trying to lie to you, it's trying to help you. Deep in your temporal lobe, structures like the hippocampus store memories, while the amygdala slaps emotional tags on them. When you recall a moment, especially one tied to emotion, your brain doesn't just pull it out like a file, it reconstructs it. And like a well-meaning but unreliable narrator, it adds lighting, softens edges, and sometimes swaps out dialogue altogether. The result? A story that feels comforting, not necessarily correct. Take that awkward high school dance. Maybe at the time you spilled soda on yourself, stood in the corner, and vowed never to go out in public again. But now, you remember the cheesy music, the disco ball spinning above you, the one person who smiled your way. You almost forget the humiliation. This is called the positivity effect. As time passes, your brain starts favoring positive interpretations of past events, particularly in autobiographical memory. It's like your mind's built-in PR team doing damage control. There's also a little thing called the reminiscence bump. It's why so many of your favorite memories seem to cluster between the ages of 15 and 30, even if those years weren't objectively the best. Your brain catalogs identity-forming experiences during that phase with extra intensity. And later, even the painful stuff, like heartbreaks or college stress, gets reframed not as trauma, but as texture. It becomes part of a narrative, the time you were finding yourself. You rarely re-feel the sting exactly, you feel the story around the sting. But the bias doesn't stop with personal memory. You romanticize entire eras. Remember dial-up internet? Awful, right? But you think back on it now with a weird sense of coziness, like, simpler times. You forget the frustration and remember the novelty. This is rosy retrospection, a fancy name for a simple trick your mind plays, judging the past more favorably than the present just because you survived it. And it's not just comfort, it's control. When life feels uncertain or chaotic, looking backward gives you a sense of stability. The past is fixed, it can't surprise you. So even if it wasn't perfect, it becomes a mental refuge. You walk into an old diner where you used to eat lunch, and suddenly the burnt toast and fluorescent lights feel charming instead of depressing. Your memory smooths over the cracks. Ironically, this means that sometimes your toughest times become your most cherished. That cramped apartment you once swore you'd escape, now it's that magical little place with so much character. Your lonely commute becomes that hour I used to think and decompress. It's not delusion, it's selective storytelling, and your brain does it automatically. Psychologically, this kind of romanticizing serves a purpose. It boosts mood, increases resilience, and helps you build a coherent sense of self. You look back and think, I made it through that, even if the that was something you never want to relive. And the more times you revisit those memories, the more they morph. Not to deceive you, but to integrate those experiences into your personal growth narrative. So when you find yourself smiling at something that used to make you cry, that's not weakness or forgetfulness. That's your brain trying to help you carry on. It's a softening, a smoothing, a protective adaptation. You scroll through old photos on your phone, grainy, poorly lit, no filters. There's one of you in the rain, soaked through, holding takeout from a job you hated, smiling like it didn't matter. And suddenly it hits you. That wasn't such a bad time. But it was. You remember dreading those shifts. So why does it now feel like part of something beautiful? Because pain, once it's behind you, doesn't just fade, it transforms. And a huge part of why you romanticize the past is this. Your mind reshapes suffering into meaning. It doesn't erase the hard parts. It stitches them into a story where you grew, changed, earned something. It's a coping mechanism, yes, but it's also how you survive your own narrative. Here's what's happening behind the curtain. When you recall a painful memory, the part of your brain responsible for mental time travel, the medial prefrontal cortex, lights up. It starts layering in why it mattered. Your brain isn't just remembering, it's evaluating, placing that event into a broader context of who you've become. This is called retrospective meaning making. You're not lying to yourself. You're updating the story so it feels like it fits. Think of it like this. You used to cry over the tiniest failure, maybe bombing a test or getting ghosted. At the time, it felt like the end. But now, with some emotional distance, it feels like a rite of passage. You joke about it. You see the version of you who went through it and think, wow, look how far I've come. That's the pain into purpose pipeline in action. This doesn't mean trauma becomes trivial or that bad things become good, but your brain will often repurpose discomfort into character development. It's a little like composting. Something rotten breaks down and becomes fertile ground for new growth. You don't deny the pain, you fold it into the journey. There's even a term for this subtle transformation: narrative identity. Over time, you tell yourself a story about who you are and how you got here. Every heartbreak, every letdown, every weird detour contributes. The more times you reflect on these experiences, the more the raw emotion gets swapped out for significance. The tear-streaked nights become the phase where I was learning what I deserve. The friend breakup becomes the moment I finally stood up for myself. That's not denial. That's integration. Here's a real-world example. Remember that horrible group project in college where no one did the work but you? Back then, it made you question your sanity. Now, it's the reason you trust your instincts, speak up more, and value your time. You don't just remember the frustration, you remember what it taught you. That shift from helplessness to reflection is powerful. It's why you can now look back and say, it was awful, but I'm glad it happened. The psychological effect here is something called post-traumatic growth. While not everyone experiences it the same way, many people report a greater appreciation for life, better relationships, and stronger personal strength after hardships. The key is time and reflection. You need space to let the pain simmer down before you can distill it into meaning. And once you do, even bad memories start to sparkle a little, not because they were fun, but because they forged something in you. This is also why you sometimes miss times that were objectively difficult. You think of that year you lived paycheck to paycheck, eating instant noodles, chasing a dream that hadn't materialized. You remember the hunger and the hustle, but also the spark, how alive you felt, how close to the edge you were. It's romantic in a gritty kind of way, and that's not fiction. It's the way your mind honors effort, even if the reward wasn't immediate. Romanticizing the past doesn't mean rewriting it to be flawless. It means emotionally revisiting it in a way that empowers you. You take the jagged parts and over time round them into smoother stones you can carry in your pocket. Your brain, your heart, your memory, they conspire not to erase your pain, but to give it purpose. So when you find yourself longing for a time you once hated, take a breath. You're not broken or confused. You're just human. And your mind is doing what it does best, making sense of your story, one scar and smile at a time. A quick word before we wrap up. If you've ever caught yourself missing a chapter of your life that was objectively messy, uncomfortable, or even painful, don't beat yourself up for it. That's not weakness. That's resilience. It means your brain is doing something extraordinary, transforming wounds into wisdom, discomfort into depth. As Viktor Frankl once said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And you've done just that, even if you didn't realize it. The past isn't perfect, but your relationship with it, that's where the beauty lives.